Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it visible full screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, visible.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I'm dealing with environmental impact assessment, documentation, and process. This is the unit 4. So in this unit 4, we have the sections 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4 and 4.5.
This is Sandesh here. Your presentation, left hand side, few things are like hidden. We can't, like for example, preliminary stages. It's going towards left side. We can't see that. I can't see. I don't know whether others.
No.
Yeah, it's same here.
Is it fine now?
I think you have zoomed.
I have to zoom.
Don't zoom out, not zoom in, zoom out. You just say.
Now is it okay?
No. You do control minus.
Is it fine?
No, Gajan.
No, it has completely like over zoomed actually.
Over.
Zoom, it means it has gone beyond. You just escape and then again put it into the. You are using PPT or PDF?
PPT. Now you can see, right?
No.
You can't say anything.
Just escape, sir.
Just escape. Do escape and then put like press F5. Nah?
Yeah.
Press escape and then press F5.
Is it okay?
No, it remains the same.
I will close this and I will share it again. Now is it fine?
Not, it is not fine.
No, Gajan. You have to redo it.
How do you do?
Sir, please unshare and again
Share and
reshare.
then you share.
Yeah, now unshared, right?
No,
Still showing.
same slide is visible.
Same slide is visible. Okay.
Just unshare and then do.
You put your video off, then you put first put your video off, unshare, then start again.
So video is in off mode only. Okay. So now is
Now it is unshared.
right? Okay.
You share the entire screen, then it will be okay. Maybe you are sharing the only PPT. Maybe you share the entire screen and then open the PPT. It will come better.
Option C. Now is it fine? Can
Now
someone
Gajanan,
check?
put to the presentation mode. Press F5.
Yeah, that will do. Now is it fine?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
now it's fine.
Thank you. So I'm dealing with chapter 4, EIA documentation and process. So in that we have 5 sections. So we will go one by one. The 4.1 is preliminary stages of EIA. So in that we have to look into project screening, scoping, concentration of alternatives, establishing the environmental baseline, impact identification. And in 4.2 section, impact prediction, evaluation, and mitigation. So in that we need to go in detail the prediction, evaluation, and mitigation steps. So later in 4.3 section, we need to describe the impact on decisions. And in 4.4 section, participation, requisites, and review. So in that public participation, requisites for a good EIS, a review of review of EIS, and then in finally in 4.5 section, so we need to check that EIA monitoring and auditing concepts. So let us move on the section. The first section is the preliminary stages of EIA. So in the preliminary stages of EIA, we need to select an appropriate project team. So headed by a project leader and some other subordinates in that team. Later, we need to have we need to take that managing specialist inputs. The team has to manage that inputs taken from the specialists. Then we need to take the liaising with the people involved in the process. So we need to take the opinion from the people who have involved in those process. That is the preparation of EIA, environmental impact assessment. Then later, so managing the change in the internal and external environment of the project. So we need to look into the changes which are present in the internal and external environment related to that project project site. Then we need to coordinate the contribution of the team in the various documentary outputs. So we have to coordinate the team, whatever they have data collected that we have to accumulate, and we need to contribute those in a documentary method. So in the first step, project screening. Screening for EIA follows the various steps so that we can see in this chart. So screening follows initial environmental examination. Say in a site where the project is going to take place. So where we need to do some initial examination, initial environmental examination. What is the current status of the environment in that site area, that we need to check in the initial step. Then we need to go for an initial examination review. So this initial examination may tells that the project has major impacts. So some may tells has there is no impact or very minor impact. So in that case, if minor impact is there or there is no impact, then EIA is not required. If it has major impacts, then we need to do EIA in detail. Okay. So in that next stage is this scoping, or we need to define the terms of reference. So conditions, given by the government bodies or external agencies. We need to consider all those things. Then we need to provide and scope for that assessment. So we need to define terms of reference here. Then if the impact is very high, then we have to go for full scale EIA. So that's in the in detail procedure we need to follow to prepare an assessment. After that, we have to go to EIA review. So once again, we need to review with some experts inputs. Then we can go for decision making. If the decision is it tells that there is some gaps, then we have to go for once again the process is to be repeated. Or if the EIA is approved, then we have to go for monitoring and EIA audit and evaluation. This is the last step, and it will repeat every year like that. So next is the purpose of doing this EIA, environmental impact assessment. So the purpose is identify those projects or activities that may cause potential significant impacts. So potential significant impacts on the environment or surrounding areas that we need to identify. Next is the identity. This identifies the special conditions or analyze that may be required by international funding bodies. So some regulatory bodies which gives the funding for that project, they may ask some or they may give some conditions that we need to analyze whether it is within that condition or not. So next is the categorizing the project as one where it's in the full scale EIA required or not required. Some further environmental analysis is required, no further environmental analysis is required, like that. So this is categorizing the project. So whether full scale is required or not, this further environmental analysis is required or not, like that we can define here. So this is the purpose of doing environmental impact assessment. So in the environmental impact assessment, we need to, the next step is the scoping. Here we need to define the impact scope of the impact. This is a process of interaction between government agencies and project proponents. So here the interaction between government agencies and project proponent takes place. Project proponent, they have to define the scope of the impacts, so which identifies special and temporary boundaries for the EIA, important issues and concerns, information necessary for decision making, significant effects and factors to be considered. So in this, all the impacts which is related to that project where the assessment is going on, that is to be considered. So we need to define a scope on that impacts, various type of impacts. So it will establish the terms of reference. The importance of scoping is, you can see here, it serves to facilitate efficient EIA by identifying appropriate areas for consideration. That is key issues, concerns, alternatives. So scoping will define the efficiency or efficient EIA by identifying appropriate areas. So it reduces likelihood of deficiencies in EIA, that is, ensures that important issues are not overlooked. And it also prevents unnecessary expenditure and time delay from oversights or unnecessary areas of study. So it will give you an direct the things or direct the definitions what could be done for an EIA assessment, what is the impact and what is to be done in this assessment. So it is the importance of scoping. Scoping will define, or we will tell this as a summary. So summary what could be done in a detailed EIA. So next step is the consideration of alternatives. So after scoping, we have to consider alternatives. So scoping will define the impacts So what are the impacts? So if the impact is very high, then we need to look into alternatives. If alternative procedures or alternative site is available, that we need to check. So this consideration of alternatives, it will help to strengthen the decision making. It will strengthen the decision making. So it will strengthen the public capability. It will help to public also. And then it improves the methodology of the EIA and integration of the techniques used for relative comparisons. So it will help to minimize the environmental impacts. So consideration of alternative pathway will help to environmental impact reduction. So next is the establishing the environmental baselines. So after this consideration of alternative, we can go to the baseline study. So in the baseline study, we have to look at the current condition of that project area, and what is the condition before that, and what will be the condition after coming that project. These three things we need to account here. So in this baseline study, we can have different types of data. So where we can collect GIS data, remote sensing data, area map, like that. We can have different types of tools here to account the baseline. So it will define the project type, location, size. For example, capital investment, number of people affected, project capacity, like that. Receiving environmental characteristics, it will give the characteristics of the environment surrounding that project area. The strength of community opinion, so it will take that opinion of that surrounding communities. Confidence in prediction of impact, so it will give the inputs to impact assessment. And baseline data collection on biodiversity. So biodiversity, flora, fauna are also be taken into consideration in this baseline study. So next is the impact identification. So impact identification involves identify those projects or activities that may cause potential significant impacts. So we need to consider those projects which will have a significant impact on the environment. We should ensure compliance with the regulations, identify the direct, indirect, or the secondary impacts. Some projects may have direct effect, some projects may have indirect effect, that we need to consider here while doing the impact identification. So then we can categorize the project as like this: full-scale EIA required, or further analysis required, or no further analysis is required. So for this impact identification, we can have some methods, appropriate method. So type and size of proposal, type of alternative being assessed, nature of likely impacts, experience using EIA methods, resources available, nature of public involvement, procedural or administrative requirements. So these things we can consider here for selecting of an appropriate methods. So next we can see this EIA methodologies. So we can account for 5 methods to assess the environmental impacts. So in that we can see that simplest method is the ADOC. So it will give some minimum information, like the condition of the project area, vegetation present, what is the status of flora and fauna, like that. It will give minimum this information. The next method is the overlays. This relies on set of maps, environmental characteristics. So different characteristics of the environment, maps, geographical map, hydrology map, like that. We will use those things for assessing the environmental condition. So the next method is the checklist. Checklist is a form of questionnaires. So where it will have some questions, a status of the environment, what is the water bodies present in the area, and what is the impact on that, like that. It will have some checklist of questionnaires which is to be answered, and like that we can assess the environmental impacts. The another method is the matrices. So matrices, it will correlate with the activities. So with the checklist, we'll have some specific parameters. So in the matrices, it will link with the activities. So it identifies the cause, effect, specify actions, link action to impact. It's a good method for displaying EIA results. So another method is the network. So network will establish cause, condition, effect, a network. A network, it forms a network. So cause, condition, and effect of those impacts, it will make a network. So it will useful in a simplified form in the checking for second order impacts, handles the direct and indirect impacts. So some projects may have direct impact and indirect impact. All those things can be taken into account here in these methodologies. The next we'll move on to.
Sorry for the interaction. Can anyone summary this part? Can I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you are audible.
Can anyone summary this part? Aishwarya, please summary this part.
Okay, ma'am, I'll summarize.
Okay.
Firstly, sir explained about the preliminary stages of EIA, project screening, and identification, categorizing the project as one as full-scale EIA required, whether full-scale EIA required or not, like that. Importance of scoping, consideration of alternatives which have.
Ma'am, you are not audible properly. Aishwarya, ma'am.
Your voice is very low.
The voice is breaking.
Hello?
Now clear.
Okay. Firstly, sir explained about preliminary stages of EIA.
But little break.
Preliminary stages of EIA. Am I audible now?
Yes. Yes, continue, please.
Aishwarya, you are not audible. Aishwarya?
Hello? Am I audible now?
Are you not audible very clearly, ma'am? Your audio is not clear, ma'am. Another person, anyone can summary for this part?
Can I summarize?
Okay.
Okay. So, sir, first talk about the preliminary stage of EIA. In that, sir, talk about the role of a project manager, like selecting an appropriate project team, managing a specialist input, and managing the change in the internal and external environment of the project. After that, sir talked about the first step in EIA, that is project screening. In project screening, is done so that it is like first internal assessment whether the EIA is required or not. Based on the screening, that if the project is on large scale, then EIA is done. In some cases, EIA is not done. After the project screening, scoping is done. So in scoping, the environmental impacts of the project is discussed in details. So majorly the key impacts are discussed in this. All the project proponents, like the developer, the authority, and the other relevant agencies are like the public and the NGOs, public or like the local public, discuss and negotiate and come to a point. After that, the third step is consideration of alternatives. In this, the other alternatives of the projects are discussed, whether the other alternatives are better or this one is better. So this is done so the to strengthen the decision making, strengthens the public credibility, and it also improves the methodology of the EIA and integration technique used for the relative comparison. Environmental baseline. So baseline is basically the past data of that particular area where the project will happen in the future. So initial baseline contains various physical and socio-economic environment of the study, like for example the air quality of the area before starting the project, geological condition, the soil, and many other things. After that, so I talked about the impact identifications. In impact identification, after collecting the baseline data, the impact like whether the project will have adverse impact or favorable impact are identified and taken into account. And then sir talked about the EIA assessment, EIA methodologies. In that, sir talked about various methodologies like ad hoc, overlay, checklist, matrices, and networks. So in ad hoc, only minimum information is taken, like the impact on flora and fauna, impact on lakes and forests, and then in overlays, overlays set of maps of environmental characteristics are taken from like using geospatial or radar sensing data. And in checklist possibly the questions are prepared, uh, basically questions are prepared. Then there's matrices. Matrices is a better method in which cause effect relationships between specific activities and identified. Mm, that's it. Yes.
Thank you very much. Sir, please continue your presentation, sir.
Thank you, Atanu. So here we have finished the section 4.1. So in that we have seen the importance of the preliminary stages of EIA. So in that the consideration of alternatives, and we have talked about establishing the environmental baselines. So establishing the environmental baseline is important because it will tell you about the what is the current situation or the before the project which is to be coming up in that area, the situation, environmental conditions, like that. So this gives an idea about the current status of the site. So for example, if we want to construct an industry which is near to lake, so in that while doing this baseline data, we can check that what is the quality of that lake water. So probably the lake water may be contaminated before establishing the industry. So that may lead to die of fish like that. So that can be taken into account. So later it will help to the assessment in a right way. So similarly, the consideration of alternatives, it will tells you the alternate routes which are present. Like that, we can save the some environmental conditions like vegetations, forest, like that. So it will help for the protecting the environment. So next we will move on to the section 4.2. So where that we need to study impact prediction, evaluation, and mitigation steps. So this EIA is all about the predictions, and it's needed at the earlier stage. So prediction is followed by evaluation and mitigation step. Prediction is the first step, which is followed by evaluation and mitigation steps. So in the prediction, we need to do some data collection here, scientific characteristics that impact on the project area that is to be taken into account here. The scientific characteristics that impact cases and effects that we need to account here. The prediction drawn on the physical, biological, socioeconomic, and anthropological data and techniques that we need to collect here. And it may employ the mathematical models, physical models, socio-cultural models, economic models, experimental experiments, expert judgments, etc. So for the prediction, we will have this type of tools. So this is the predicting the impact. So what is the adverse effect of that project? So we can have all these things here to predict an impact. So next we need to evaluate so that impact after the prediction. So say we have predicted some impact is there. So it will have some adverse effect. It will affect on the water quality, or it will affect on the air quality, like that, or it will affect the soil of the surrounding area. Then we need to evaluate. We evaluate the what is the range of effect. So this evaluation involves comparison with laws, regulations, and standards. So we have some standard guidelines given by CPCB, KSPCB, like that. We need to follow, or MOEF, like that. We need to follow those guidelines, laws, regulations. Sometimes Supreme Court also gives some regulations. So that we need to compare with our assessment. So later we can consult with the decision makers. So some expertise in that area, we can consult with that experts to make a decision on that impacts. So then reference to preset criteria such as protected sites, features, or species. Some protected areas will be there, protected forest area, like that. We need to check out all those things. Then consistency with the government policy objectives. We need to follow the government policy which is applicable to that project area. Then acceptability to the local community or the general public. So this is the public hearing. We need to take the opinion from the public. So what is the effect, and what are all the adverse effect they can have with this upcoming project. So later is the we have some techniques for evaluation. So we can have use these two techniques. One is the scaling and weighting technique, another is the cost benefit analysis. In scaling and weighting techniques, the scaling refers to a magnitude, so it's in a numerical data. The scaling can be used either alone to determine some composite score for magnitudes. So scaling gives a number. So if the number is good, the project is in account with the environmental this one safeguards. So if the number is very low, so it has large adverse effect. So in this way we can evaluate scaling. Then the weighting technique is we need to give the weighting for each and every environmental the components. So we will have the affected areas like water, soil, like that, impact on vegetation, biodiversity, like that. So we need to give the weightage for that. So this is the scaling and weighting techniques. So which has the more impact. So we need to give the more weightage on that, and we need to take decision to protect that one. So this is the one of the evaluating technique. The another is the cost benefit analysis. So this is related to money. So financial appraisals, cost minimization, and cost effectiveness methods. So that can be used. So this is a comprehensive, it has comprehensive scope. It's based on the economics, includes relative cost and benefits to evaluate the net social effect. So sometime it will help to protect the this environmental adverse effect. So in this way, it will help to the proponent who is ready to start that project in a specific area. So it will gives an rough idea what is the environmental effect. So it will minimize that. So if we take the cost benefit analysis, so it will minimize the cost which is to be used for waste disposal, like that. So while starting the project. So next is the mitigation. So in the mitigation step, it will answers the question what can be done about them. So what can be done if there is a larger effect. So what can be done to avoid that one. So it will tell possible measures may include changing the project sites, routes, route of that project, process, raw material, operating methods, design plans, location, and timings. So this is the mitigation step, and it will answers what is the alternate for that. So like that. So we can change that project site or project area if it has an adverse effect on some water bodies or vegetation. So we can change that site, or we will change that pathway. We will change the process, raw material. If the raw material may cause us a lot of toxic gases, it will if it is releasing a lot of toxic gases, then we can change that raw material. We can go for some alternative raw materials. So then we can change that operating methods also, design plans, locations, like that. We can change the timings like that. So next is the impact on decision. This is the next section. So where we need to discuss about the decision making. So after, so you can see the sections here. Okay, so we have finished the preliminary stages of EIA, impact prediction, evaluation, and mitigation. After this mitigation, we will have, now in the stage, we are in the stage to take some decisions. So what is the impact on decision? Depend upon all this data we have collected already. We have collected some of this basic data that we can account here in the decision impact on decisions. So your decision may be in the right way, or it may be wrong. So that we need to check. So whether the decision can be taken on the right way, or it has some adverse effect, that we need to account here. So decision can be made at various levels. So you can have decision at various stages of that project development. So in the initial stage, or in the after getting a lot of data accumulation, or in the final stage of that project, like that, we can have some decisions. So decision making, it can be done in the various level. So you can see this in the below chart. So the process development and policy redefinition. So it will go to this environmental assessment. If the environmental assessment is fully completed, then we will have some decision making. So in the environmental assessment, we need to account for the procedure, methodology, and documentation. We need to prepare a document. Complete information is to be included in this documentation. So if this is completed, then we will send it for approvals, or some permissions, and some conditions we can put into that. So it will then it will help to protect the environmental. So environmental these conditions that can be protected by taking the account of the all those information. So then we'll have some records, reports, and monitoring, and post-project analysis, that monitoring and this audit, this will be the final, and it will always repeated one. So where if the conditions will changes, then it will be accounted in the monitoring or auditing stage, and according to that we can change the earlier plan, like that. So it will affect on the decision making. Decision making will be taken in various stages. Say if once the EIA assessment is over, we cannot tell that the decision is final. So it may changes with various aspects. So that's why we tell it as the decision can be done in various level. Some opinions may come later of that project implementation also. Then we need to modify the whatever the gaps are present in that EIA. So we can see this decision planning and development process. Major projects have a life cycle including a number of key stages from initial planning to project close down. Key decision making stages. So there are some key decision making stages are there. This depend upon the environmental effect of that project. So in that we can follow this flow chart. We'll have some planning, then if any conflicts is there, conflict resolution, then construction and operation and close down. Some impacts will be closed down and some impacts to be monitored, regularly monitored. So it may changes with the climatic conditions. So in other flow chart, we can see that early stages including screening, scoping, alternatives, impact identification. This is the first stage we can do. This is for decision making and planning and development of the process. So next is the black box. In this we can have prediction and evaluation. Black box is nothing but this is a confidential meeting that the project proponent or that company may have some confidential meeting with this preliminary data they have collected. So that is the scoping. They can find some screening, impact identification. After that they have some, after that they may have some this one confidential meeting. So where that they can have some prediction and evaluation. So they can evaluate the impacts. Then it will go to the review and decision making step. Again, they have to review. Once the assessment is completed, then they need to check it again. The review process will come. So whether the assessment is ready for decision making or not, that we can check it here. So if there is some gap, then we need to fulfill it. So this is the process review, which helps to making the decision. So next is the last stage. If these things are done, then we have to monitor and continuing the assessment. This is the responsibility of the management, monitoring, and we also have to go through with the auditing, regular auditing process. So next we can see the criteria for assessing the impact of environmental impact. So we can see that some criteria assessing the impact of environmental. So impact can be assessed. Okay, so in that you can see that some of the points here I have collected. The centrality in decision making, that is to what extent does EIA make a difference. So this is the impact of decision. So it will tell you about the impact on decision. The centrality in decision making. So to what extent does EIA makes a difference? There is a change or nothing like that. The next is the integration in the project cycle and approval process. That is to what extent EIA is easily bypassed. So these are the some we can say some of the points. This will taken into consideration while making the decision. Then consistency in application to development proposals, fairness in applications, providing opportunity for participation and influence in the process by all relevant stakeholders, flexibility in terms of application to various stages in the EIA process. That's from consideration of, for example, consideration of alternative to implementation or project modification. Then scope in terms of considering a range of environmental factors, both biophysical and socio-economics. So all these things we need to account here. So for before taking any decisions. So next comes the participation.
Sorry for the interaction. Can anyone willing to summary this part?
Ma'am, am I audible? Now,
Ah.
this is Aishwarya. Shall
Okay,
I
ma'am.
summarize now?
Okay, summarize. Summarize, ma'am.
Okay. You were asking about to summarize only, right?
Yeah.
Okay then. Sir explained about establishing environmental baselines by taking the example of a lake. He explained about consideration of alternatives, impact prediction, evaluation and mitigation. Prediction is about collection of data and prediction of impact. Evaluation is a comparison with laws, regulation and standards. Techniques used for evaluation is cost benefit analysis, scaling and weighing. Mitigation, next step is mitigation, where answers for the question is to find out like what can be done. Steps involves like changing project sites, processes, etc. And then sir explained about impacts on decision making. It can be made at various level. He explained the flow chart representing sound integrated decision making process. And then sir explained about decision planning and developmental process. Major project have a life cycle including a number of key stages from initial planning to project close down, key decision making stages, and lastly explained about criteria for assessing the impact of environmental impact. Okay, I think this is done, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Sir, please continue your presentation.
No,
Thank
once
you.
again, let us take a break now for lunch, okay?
Okay,
Revati,
sir.
let us take
Okay,
a
sir.
break, okay? So
Okay, sir.
Gajanana, we will continue at 2 o'clock, okay?
Okay. Okay, sir. Okay.
Let us have break now.
Thank you, sir.